This is Radio Now 95.3 FM. Come for the news, stay for informed conversations.
The newsmaker today is Comrade Nuhu Toro, the General Secretary of the Trade Union Congress of Nigeria. The TUC is focused on promoting and safeguarding the economic and social welfare of its members, preserving and extending their rights within a just, free and democratic society. The union is also a part of organized labour and together with the Nigeria Labour Congress has been at the forefront of the clamour for a new minimum wage. Comrade Toro joins us this morning to discuss the roles of the TUC and its fight for better working conditions for all Nigerians. Comrade Toro, good morning and thank you for joining us on the conversation today.
Yeah, good morning. Thank you for having me.
Right, we understand that you're a busy man, so we want to get a quick understanding of what it is the TUC is about and how you go about achieving your aims and objectives.
Well, certainly the organization is established to add value to the working and the poor people in this country. So if you ask me for a synopsis of the organization, so that represents what it is.
So, the TUC and the NLC have been together in fighting for improved living conditions of Nigerians. Before we jump into the very popular minimum wage conversation, what else has the organized labor been doing around improving the working conditions of Nigerians?
Well, we've also been looking at social justice. Social and economic justice is key because fundamentally, for any worker to survive, we must be able to have a fingertip social justice. And for considering the high cost of living, for any worker to be able to feed at least without exaggerating 2 or 3 meals a day, we should have economic justice. So those are the cardinal rallying points of what the two congresses do to enhance the living of the poor and the entire citizens of the country.
So, I mean, one of the things that should buttress the national minimum wage conversation is our current economic situation. And we know that organized labor met with the federal government and there were certain agreements that you came to, both sides came to in the interim, including the 35,000 naira wage award. At some point, there was news that the government was not paying that consistently. Can you speak to us? Have you been seeing the payments consistently?
Well, that is also a fact. If you check your records, you will confirm that I'm not sure they paid more than 2 months, which also violates that principle of good faith. When you enter into negotiations, ideally both parties ought to bring to the fore some level of good faith that they are not seeing, because if you had promised to provide, to sign an understanding and you are reneging, it doesn't suggest you are honoring that obligation. So and we urge them to look at it, because it makes nonsense of the entire process. If as little as honoring and understanding is not respected, then we are honestly not too sure we could trust them anymore.
And when we come to the discussions around the minimum wage, this was something that Labour actually began with the previous administration, right? When Chris Ngige was Minister of Labour and Employment. And as of that time, there was a committee that was supposed to have been announced, made up of the federal government and members of Labour. Then you had raised the alarm that the government had refused to sit with you. And it took a while for it to even take off as a possible conversation with this current administration. Where are you with the makeup of the committee that should do these deliberations?
Well, I think you are getting it mixed up. There's a National Advisory Council, which was what the previous minister didn't set up. And hopefully we've been assured that that is going to be set up. Then the National Negotiating Committee for the new wages is also what has not been constituted. I'm sure if you follow the news, you will agree with me that names of both Congresses have been sent, awaiting inauguration. And you know clearly that there is no way they can commence work without inauguration. That's what we're waiting for.
So, part of the conversations around improving welfare of Nigerians includes promises from the Ministry of Labour to that the federal government will keep it part of the agreements, will implement agreements it has reached with trade unions. Looking over the course of the last 6 months, let's deal with this particular administration. Has this administration demonstrated its willingness to keep its promises beyond these statements?
But from what I have analyzed so far, I mean, you will have your answer for free. If some elementary part of the understanding is deficient, I wonder how you will conclude that they have respected those understandings. And it's key. When you enter into an agreement, the onus lies on both parties to respect. And nobody has monopoly of disobedience. So which means if the other party disobeys, of course, party X can equally disobey. That is where we are.
Of course. Now, when you talk about disobedience, in this case, one measure that the organized labor has used to express its displeasure has been the calling of strikes. We've heard over and over again that when the organized labor goes on strike, Nigeria loses. There have been conversations around preventing these losses for Nigeria. Is there any interest by the organized labor in using a different method of getting its opinions or its displeasure across to the federal government outside of strikes?
Well, that opinion of yours is not also correct. You know that there are so many legal ways under the law to ensure that those rights and privileges are protected without necessarily embarking on an action. So that notion is not correct. We suggest that there are 1,001 ways that issues could be dispensed with without necessarily embarking on an action.
Right. So, is it possible for us to assess the effectiveness of these other ways that you've alluded to?
Well, it will also amount to letting the cat out of the bag, because at the end of the day, there are strategies that is being used, and if you compel me to spill it, then automatically it becomes something else. I'm afraid I might not be able to spill it out in the public domain, but be rest assured that there are 1,001 other means besides actions, industrial actions to really canvass for some of these unfair practices.
And now, Mr. Toro, one of the things, and this was sometime last year when the TUC had floated the idea of 200,000 naira as an acceptable minimum wage. At some point, the NLC was saying something between 100, maybe 200,000 naira. Is that still your stance? Is that what the union will be taking to the negotiating table?
Again, you see, that is not sacrosanct. It cannot be static, because you will agree with me that then the value of our currency is not the same with what the value of our currency is now. We suggest that it has already been eroded even before it is approved. So, and you also have to factor in some economic indices. For instance, the high cost of living index, inflation, which negates whatever you negotiate, and that is why over time you have to enter into these negotiations again, or else the value will be eroded. So no matter how much the quantum is, if you don't factor in the high cost of living, you don't factor in inflation, you don't factor in exchange rate, because you know very well that bulk of the problem is also caused by exchange rate, because the government has no control over the exchange rate, which creates volatility, and it goes up whenever it wants to. So I think that is anything to go by, then automatically perhaps the demand might change, because, like I said, what you bought last year with 5 naira, certainly you know you can't buy it this year with that same 5 naira, which
right.
means inflation has set it. So a whole lot of frustration will be looked at. The cost of living index, inflation, and the ability to purchase. All of those indices will be factored in by some senior economic experts before we arrive at the conclusion on the way forward. But certainly, we will ensure that people are not struggling. They must have the ability to buy. And what people oftentimes don't understand, when there is currency in circulation, what that needs to do is to stimulate the economy. If people have purchasing power, they will go to the market and buy. The money will circulate and come back to the economy and thereby stimulating it. But people oftentimes don't get this right. But that will ensure it's done by the grace of God.
So, as of 3 months ago, there were up to 15 states in the country that still had not implemented the current minimum wage, signed into law in 2019. If we see a revised and upward review, if and when, because the government has said that it will come, so if and when we see the upward review, aren't you perhaps concerned that these states are still paying, what was it? Was it 19,500 of once upon a time? What is the union going to do in making or getting these states to actually commit and begin to pay workers that signed legislation?
So the struggle will be taken to the state. Any state that is ready will be confronted fairly. I think one of the days that we allow them to just have some key facts. This time around is a different ball game entirely, except if you want people to die. And if you don't want them to die automatically, you must take the struggle to all those recalcitrant states.
Mr. Toro, just as we wrap this up, what do we have to expect from the TUC in this early stage of 2024?
Well, very optimistic like all Nigerians are. But again, one thing I can promise is the fact that whatever needs to be done will be done.
Right. Well, Comrade Toro, thank you very much for speaking with us this morning. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for having me.
That's our newsmaker this morning on Now Breakfast. We were speaking with Comrade Nuhu Toro, the General Secretary of the Trade Union Congress of Nigeria, getting to understand what the Trade Union Congress does, how it goes about achieving its aims, and delving into the issue of the new minimum wage. Now Breakfast continues with Community Watch, in just a bit. Do stay with us.
This is Radio Now 95.3 FM.